If you're an agency owner making between 5 to 30K a month and you're currently taking every single sales call yourself, this video is probably going to hit very, very hard because you're probably getting a lot of appointments, 10, 20, even 30 booked calls a week, but half of them no show, half of them are bad fits, and half of them don't even have the money to invest. And you're spending your entire day jumping on calls with people who should have never been on your calendar in the first place. And the annoying part is, from the outside, it looks like you're actually doing well. Your calendar is full, you're busy all day, you feel like there's momentum, but then at the end of the week, cash collected simply doesn't reflect the amount of calls that you took, right? And this is where most agency owners completely misdiagnose the problem, right? They think they need more leads, better ads, or a better offer, or a better script, or that they just need to get better at sales, but that's not usually the problem. The real bottleneck is something way deeper in the way your sales process is actually structured. And once I fixed this for my own agency, it was one of the main reasons we were able to scale past 150K a month without me spending my entire day talking to random unqualified prospects. So in this video, I'm going to show you what the bottleneck actually is and how to fix it and how to turn the calls you're already booking into way more cash collected. Because you probably don't need double the amount of appointments, but you need to stop wasting your time on people who were never going to buy in the first place. All right, boys. So let's get into it.
Let's actually dive into the sales process behind it. We're going to go into the one call process and also the two call closing process here when it makes sense to do the switch, and also when and where to actually hire, setters and closers and everything here too. So let's just get right into it. I would always start off with doing a one call closing process where on the funnel here that you send people to the ads on the booking page there, they book directly onto your calendar to do the actual closing of the call, right? The sales call. Regardless of how sophisticated your market is, if you're first launching ads, you always want to start with that one call. Purely because less friction equals more flow, right? Every additional step you add between someone seeing your ad and making a purchase decision creates friction, all right? And friction kills conversions. The core principle here is very, very simple. Always start with flow before adding friction. So this is how the one call process here is going to work, right? They're going to book in that call on the calendar and then they're going to show up to it. You build some rapport, you set the frame, and then you go into the discovery phase. You understand, what they've tried, past solutions. You understand the business as well, the cost of inaction, find the desire as well, their goal. And then you transition into pitching them. And then you pitch them and you kind of break down your entire process essentially. And then you do a little temp check with them, the next steps, and break down like the investment. You have them pre-sell themselves and everything too. And then you handle their objections, and essentially just close them. So that's kind of how the one call closing process here works. And this right here is how the two call closing process works. People are booking straight into a 15-minute phone call with the setter that you've now onboarded essentially. And the setter basically just are going to take that intro call over the phone, dial them up, and just build some rapport, ask them some qualifying questions just to figure out all of this right here essentially, and also figure out if there's any partners in the business too that would need to be there to make the actual decision. And then you transition, you do a little pitch. You don't really want to dig too deep into pain here or too deep into what you actually offer, because that's all going to be on the actual demo call, the sales call that we're going to book after this. And then you double tie down and send them some assets after the intro call. So if the lead was qualified, for example, the setter is going to book them into that demo call with the closer or you, for example. And after they book them in, you're just going to tell them, and when they're transitioning to booking that demo, they just want to position you as the ultimate authority, like, hey, Theo, he's the one who's important. He's the CMO here, essentially, who's worked with over 200 high-ticket coaches, exactly like yourself, and gotten them above 100K a month run rates, blah, 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 blah. He built the system from inside and out. I think this would be a perfect fit. Would be cool to set up like a demo. And then, yes, sure, find a time. Obviously, try to have it as short as possible, like the same day or the next day, to book that demo call. And then they just make sure that, the time is good and everything. And then they're going to send them like a pre-call VSL essentially for that demo as well. And they're going to watch that essentially. And then they're going to show up to the demo call here, where the closer basically just do a little introduction, build some rapport, recap what was covered in the intro call right here. And then they basically just kind of repeat the cost of inaction here, just dig very deep into the pain here. And then you transition into the pitch, break all of that down essentially, show that it's different from anything they've tried before. And then they pre-sell themselves, and then they break down the actual investment and everything, and then objection handling and all that good stuff essentially. So that's kind of how the process there works. The sales process itself is fundamentally like the exact same in terms of like the information we need to collect, the pitch, the close, and everything. But what changes now is how you distribute the process across multiple touch points instead of just one call. All right. So when you actually implement a 2-call process here, okay, I'd recommend you consider a 2-call process when you have one or more of these situations right here. You have a high volume with high disqualification rate of people booking straight into your calendar. You know, if you're getting flooded with leads, about 40% plus are unqualified, then a 2-call process here acts sort of as a gatekeeper to protect the closer's time. And secondly, if there's multiple decision makers here as well, for businesses where you consistently deal with multiple decision makers, the intro call just ensures all of them are going to be present for the demo. And the third one, trust building required. In markets where there's extreme skepticism, the intro call just allows you to build more trust and authority before asking for the actual sale. The fourth one is just sophisticated / unemotional markets. Some markets here are naturally less emotional, so the intro call gathers logical ammunition that you can use to create emotional urgency on the actual demo call. All right. So again, the intro call here is just to filter out all the unqualified leads and only book the qualified demos for the closer who's already pre-qualified, you could say. So you should not use a 2-call process though if you have a very emotion-driven offers, such as like dating coaches, you know, fitness offers, stuff like that, or a low-ticket offer under 3K, or when your 1-call closing rate is already strong, like 25% plus. Or if, you know, the disqualification rate is not really a problem, for example, like let's say 90% of the people are very, very qualified and they show up for the demo and everything, then I would not really use the 2-call process. And also when you're just starting out and need to validate your offer and process, just stick to the 1-call process essentially. If you need to move to a 2-call closing process later, obviously do it, but it usually only makes sense when you have too much volume to handle the 1-call effectively. Now, for agencies though, I've found that running a 2-call process here is most common due to multiple different reasons, okay? The main ones here being having to educate sophisticated leads on the process of generating leads online, for example, making sure all decision makers are there, conducting pre-call education on why we're the best option due to, you know, there being a shit ton of other competitions out there. And in terms of like the little pros and cons here of the 2-call process as well, there are 100% benefits to run that 2-call process, but there's definitely some serious like drawbacks that you need to understand. One of them being that there's going to be more friction, right? Less offers are going to be made. Essentially, there's going to be less pitches made on the actual call. And every additional step is going to kill conversion, right? There's going to be leaks. You're going to be trading volume for quality, but you always want to make sure that the math is actually working, right? And you have to suffice for 2 calls, which means 2 no-show percentages instead of just 1. And now you have to basically worry about people not showing up to 2 different calls, right? And that's double the opportunity for things to go wrong. Another one is more complexity in tracking. Obviously in the paid ad section, I showed you the entire Harvest setup. So it's not really too complicated, but you still got to keep in mind, you're now tracking everything for 2 calls instead of just 1. And your reporting will be a bit more complicated since you do need more variables. So it's really important that you have very clean systems in the backend within the pipeline and everything go high level. In terms of the pros though, it is very, very much easier to get multiple decision makers on the actual call. And this is huge for businesses with a shit ton of these. Instead of, you know, playing phone tag, trying to get everyone on 1 call, the intro call lets you confirm who needs to be there and to actually get that commitment, okay? And a shit ton of lead flow with high disqualification percentage. So whenever you're drowning in leads, but most are fucking shit, the 2-call process here just makes so much more sense, right? First default should be trying to improve lead quality before moving to a 2-call, which you can do through like the qualification survey, which I showed in the paid ad section here. But it also can make sense to just move on to a 2-call process here. Either way, I would add more disqualification in the actual funnel before you pivot into the 2-call process. Another pro is that the setter acts as the gatekeeper, right? This basically allows your closer to not waste a lot of their time on these shitty leads who, you know, land on their calendar and it's not really qualified to buy essentially. Another pro to the closing process here is that You know, if you ever feel like trust isn't there and the prospect need to be warmed up, that is like perfect for having an intro call, right? It basically shortens the sales cycle a lot. And they already get like proof of concept that your system actually works because they're literally speaking to a setter, right? And in the majority of the offers, you would have a setter in the backend to, you know, filter out and qualify their own leads for the clients. So it's just more like proof of concept essentially. But in this case, you obviously do need to send assets in between the calls as well. Now, for agencies though, in general, I've just found that running a 2-call process here is most common due to multiple different reasons, right? You know, having to educate unsophisticated leads on the process of generating leads online, making sure all the decision makers are there, and also just conducting pre-call education on why we're the best option out there due to there being a shit ton of competition. Now, the psychology behind the 2-call processes, okay? The key differentiator between the 2-call and 1-call process is the fact that you need to effectively manage emotional states, all right? If we pull out too much emotion on the intro call that the setter has over the phone, then there's going to be no real emotional questions to ask on the demo, and it'll seem like a repetition of the entire intro call that you just had, right? So think about it like this, right? Imagine that you're watching Love Island, right? At the end of each episode, they always show you fucking clips of what's coming in the next episode and have like this crazy intense music and everything. Just enough to get you excited, but not enough to satisfy you, okay? And that cliffhanger made you want to come back and watch the next episode, the next one, the next one, the next one, okay? And that's exactly the purpose of this intro call, right? It creates enough pain and curiosity to make them want to know more about your solution, but not enough for them to have the full answer, all right? So the intro call should do these 3 things, right? Make sure the lead is qualified, collect non-emotional ammunition, you know, what they're currently doing, their current state, what they've tried, stuff like that, and get them super excited for the demo call and just book them in, all right? And the call should be 10 to 12 minutes max, I'd say. Maybe 15 minutes max, hard stop, okay? Because the key here is that we mainly focus on non-emotional ammo, all right? We're not going to be digging too deep on the pain or the problems we find on the call. We simply leave that for the demo because it doesn't serve us in getting the prospect in a highly emotional buying state on the actual intro call, right? That's what we do on the actual demo, right? We get them to fucking cry their butts out and then pay us money, right? That's ultimately like what we're going to be doing. So in the transition here to the demo though, we want to be doing 3 things, right? Pre-pitch them, end on a Love Island cliffhanger type thing, and then book the demo call and double tie down on the date and time. You basically just ask them like, is there anything you think would come up before the demo that would make you want to reschedule it? And that will basically just double tie down the time that no, everything is perfect for the time. And if there is some uncertainty there on the time, just find another one that, you know, suits better essentially. And so the repetition between the calls, right? This is pretty much the biggest concern people have about moving over to a 2-call process because they think that, won't I just be asking the same questions like twice? I'd say yes and no, okay? There is naturally going to be some overlap when you like, you know, repeat what they mentioned and everything on the intro call at the start of the demo. But the key is using that overlap to your advantage, right? So instead of asking what's your revenue on the demo call, you basically say, you know, Sarah told me you guys were doing about 30K a month, but used to be at like 50, 60K a month. Walk me through kind of what happened that caused that drop, right? And then you dig into like the cost of inaction and the opportunity cost from that, right? So you're basically using the info from the intro to ask better questions, more specific questions on the demo call, and just dig deeper and get them more in an emotional state, okay? In terms of managing the show rates here, obviously this is like the biggest problem with like the 2-call process here. They need to have them show up for 2 calls here. You want to optimize your demo show rate to be above 70%, okay? If it is below that, then the problem has nothing to do with your ads, your funnel, or your nurture automations. It is 100% a setter skill issue, right? Or best setters have show rates of like 80, 90, 95% even. And so if you see that your demo show rate is less than 70%, then it might be that your setter calls are not valuable, you know, not insightful enough for them. They never really connect with the prospect and they don't have a good tie downs on getting them to actually show up at the end of the intro call. And they don't end them on a cliffhanger enough to give them reasons to show up to the actual demo, okay? Now, so how do you actually fix this though, right? There's 2 things here. You can coach the setter and give them feedback. And if they don't improve, just fire them essentially. Like it's that simple. And the second thing you can do is just quality control the actual calls, right? Actually review and do coaching with their setters with the same frequency you do for your closers, right? Because setters are often extremely neglected. So if you have continual issues here, get on the phone and set yourself for about 1 or 2 days just to actually figure out what's the actual problem here, you know? And this might seem tedious, right? But it does have an immense ROI, okay? You spend 1 day to reestablish the process and prove what's possible, which can fix your entire setter team for literally years, right? And so the actual handoff process here between the setter to the closer, whenever you have a setter taking intro calls and a closer taking demos, the handoff is so damn critical, okay? Because the setter needs to make the closer seem like the ultimate fucking authority, like literally like a god, right? The setter needs to make this closer seem like the ultimate authority, okay? And just to give an example of that, it would be like, hey, I'm gonna connect you with James, you know, he's our marketing manager tomorrow. He's the guy who's personally scaled, you know, over 200 coaches here and has this entire system dialed in, right? He's gonna show you exactly how you can get from 30 to 100K a month again, and we'll put together a custom marketing plan for you prior to that call, fully tailored based on everything you mentioned to me on this call. Would that be cool, prospect? And then, yeah, sure, let's do it, you know. Now you'll have to kind of split test yourself and see what works the best for your niche. We've seen that something like this is working really well. So that's kind of like the handoff process right there. But let's move on into the when and how to hire these setters, okay? You should hire a setter when you have any of these 3 thresholds right here, whether that is a lead volume benchmark, efficiency benchmark, or lead quality benchmark. So that could be 30% of your calls are with unqualified prospects. You know, they're just not your ideal client, they're broke, and so on. Another one can be that your return on the ad spend is below 4x because of poor lead efficiency. And the lead to booking is under 50%. The show rate is under 70% as well. And that you've been forced to expand your booking window to more than 3+ days out due to the calendar being full of calls in the next 3 days, even though more than 20% of them will no-show or are unqualified essentially. Another one can be like you're getting over 150 plus leads per month, but only converting about 50% of them into booked calls. And you're spending 1 to 2 hours or more daily just qualifying and booking prospects. And your show rate is below 70% because you're not properly qualifying on or confirming the calls beforehand. This in turn means you're wasting time waiting for people who doesn't really show up, right? So at this stage, you're usually the one selling. So this is basically like a huge waste of the highest leverage thing in your entire business, which is your time, right? Now, most commonly, you'll hire a setter before a closer here. It obviously makes the most sense to hire one when you're ramping up volume. So you have like 4 or 5, even more leads coming through every day onto the pipeline. And you simply don't have the bandwidth anymore to manage confirming calls, calling leads within 5 minutes, following up with no-shows and so on. That's when the setter is a really fucking good investment, okay? If they help you close just one more deal that you otherwise wouldn't, you know, have by relentlessly calling, following up with the leads and so on, then you already make an ROI. And so here's a little framework you could pause and look at as well. But from here, the compensation structure of a setter is very simple. If you want to get an onshore setter, meaning like they're fully based in the US, then you ideally want them to make between 3 to 5K a month. If hiring an offshore, like South America essentially, then it should be between 1 to 2K a month. I would honestly recommend hiring onshore, but I personally did initially hire offshore when I had less cash flow. And that setter is still with us to this date, actually, which is also pretty cool. He's one of our best people, essentially. But it's your goal to reverse engineer what the numbers need to look like in order for them to hit the targets, you know, on-track earnings explained above, explained right here, essentially. So the base could be 1K to 1.5K a month, and then 5% of the cash collected per closed client. And then they also get like 250 bonus for every 50K in revenue generated from their set stat close, essentially. Now, they should be making the vast majority or all the money from commission. So here again is another like OTE calculation right here that you can look at right there. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Now we're gonna go a bit more deeper into like how to actually find these people in the hiring module of this course. But just to kind of show you like how the process here works at a bit more in depth now. Now that we actually got like a 2-call closing process here. So we'll obviously run the ads to the landing page with the survey. It has qualifying questions on it for the ICP, monthly revenue, services to provide, price points, how long they've been in business, stuff like that. Once the lead submits that survey, an opportunity is going to be created in the Go High Level, of course, and a Slack notification is going to be sent to the new leads channel for the setter in Slack, essentially. And that setter basically immediately calls them at least twice and even tries texting them and everything, just to try to have the intro with them right then and there, essentially. So there's two outcomes here though, after they submit the survey as well, whether they schedule the intro call or doesn't. If they doesn't, they get, automatically get added to like a nurture sequence, essentially, telling them to like book in and stuff. And the setter will also just try to call them up like literally instantly as well to try and convert them. And if they do schedule the intro call, then obviously appointment is going to be created on the setter's calendar, and a Slack notification is going to be sent to the intros booked channel in Slack. From here though, if the intro got booked for the same day, then the setter ideally just want to call them literally instantly. No matter the case scenario here, the setter always just want to call them literally instantly. But for example, if they didn't pick up, then the setter can just send them like a quick Loom video, for example, that's tailored. But if they don't pick up, for example, when the setter tries to call them, the setter can just call them at the actual scheduled time, essentially. But really important that the setter actually sends them like a Loom video as well, introducing themselves, stuff like that, just to nurture them even more before the call. From here though, a text is going to be automatically sent to the prospect, telling them like, hey, please confirm the appointment and everything. And if they did reply yes to that text, then everything is good, essentially. But if they did not confirm it, again, setter will just call them up before the appointment, about 2 or 3 hours before, just to actually confirm. And if they pick up, then they can just take the intro down there, essentially. So then here they're going to have the intro call. Obviously there's two outcomes here as well. One is that they show up to the intro, and another one is that they don't show up to their intro. If they don't show up to the intro, they're going to be moved to a different stage in the pipeline, which is called intro no-show. And then they're just going to automatically enter the dialer system to follow up with later, and also get the text and email reminders accordingly, essentially. Now from here though, after they've shown up to the actual intro, the setter has them on the phone. If they are not qualified, they're going to be dragged into the disqualified part of the pipeline and Go High Level. And if they're qualified, but they're not ready right now, they don't have that urgency, then just move them to long-term nurture. We don't really want to have a demo, wasting our time with that, essentially. And if they are qualified, then obviously the setter is going to book them for a demo with a closer as soon as humanly possible, right? If the call is at 1 p.m., they're going to try to get them on that demo at like 1:30, for example. So then again, demo is essentially booked right here. Now from here, did the lead convert to a demo? There are two outcomes, okay? If for some reason the setter was not able to convince them to book that demo, essentially, then they're going to be added to intro taken, not converted pipeline stage, and added also to the hot list in the pipeline stage, and just being followed up with, essentially. But if they did convert, then they will automatically get a text saying they need to confirm the appointment, and then they're also going to get a pre-call VSL, which is specifically for the demo, which is a bit more in depth, like 10-20 minutes or so, just breaking down the entire system and so on. And then from here, they're going to have the demo call with a closer. Again, there's two outcomes here. Did they show up? If not, then they get added to the no-show, demo no-show. And the closer and the setter is going to add the lead to their hot list to follow up with daily, just to rebook them. Again, just to kind of increase the show up rate on the demo, you ideally want the setter to call the lead about 2.5 hours before the demo, just to confirm. And if not, then just kind of text them and everything, just to kind of confirm the show up. But if the closer actually takes the demo, they showed up. Again, two outcomes. Did they close? Did they not close? If they didn't, then it kind of depends on the outcome, essentially. But then you want to add them to the closer hot list and just nurture them, essentially. Or you just want to BAM-FAM, is basically book like a follow-up call, essentially. And if they did close them, then just take the payment and book them in for the onboarding call with the client success manager. So yeah, boys, that is pretty much the entire sales process and how it looks like when you go from a 1 call to a 2 call, the pros and cons, and also when and how to hire them. But yeah, that's pretty much the sales process right there.